how we can understand being an intuitive empath in a modern digital world. You're going to explore things from robots and AI all the way through spiritual empathy and then into the mind and brain and how we can bridge these two worlds together to really understand how we can use these natural abilities to gain an advantage, but to also keep an eye on what's developing around us. So let's dive in. I've been talking a lot about empathy and having access to more information as an empath. Now, in neuroscience and psychology, they call this empathy. In the spiritual world, we call this clairempathy. To me, these are the same thing. You cannot have a true empath without clairempathy. Clairempathy is the ability to feel emotions. You can feel and absorb that energy from other people, plants, animals, the environment. So, a cognitive empath or emotional intelligence? No, that's not what you are. You are an empath who can feel someone else's emotions. And this is why you are defaulting to always being really kind and helpful, because you can feel the suffering of someone else. Mediating and relieving that pain means that you feel less of it. So you almost default to helping other people to control the amount of pain that you have or you're experiencing. Okay, so this is a different way of looking at empathy, sensitivities, and hypersensitivities. And when you really start to understand the structure that is behind this kind of empathy and intuition, you unlock a whole world and range of possibilities. When we're talking about clairempathy, we also have to touch on the clairs. There's 8 solid clairvoyant, right? Those clairs, those psychic abilities that all feed into sources of intuition. Now, there's 3 main sources of intuition that really impact people in the way that they make relationships and their everyday decisions. The majority of people, the other clairs come around and can influence or provide information, but when we're talking about relationships and everyday decision making, there's really 3 sources of intuition to focus on. So I haven't been talking about empathy on accident. I started here because it's a truly powerful intuitive channel that you can work to understand more deeply. When we look to intuition, we have these sources of information within us that we can recognize, create awareness to, and then provide meaning on. When you have these sources of information, it's important to understand that these intuitive types of channels can kind of get corrupted, corroded, clogged, I guess, or even leak. We talk about energy leaks, energy blocks, and distorted types of energy and information. This is very true. How does this happen? It happens a lot of different ways, and they're not all so serious. But one of the main ways people speak to is trauma. Trauma triggers, true. You also have just generalized conditioning as you're growing up as a child. All of us socialize and learn to socialize first within that family unit that you grow up with. Whatever your family looks like, it doesn't matter. You learned how to socialize within that environment. Did you go to a daycare when you were really little? You learned to socialize within that environment. So a lot of your social norms and social conditioning, these things that we feel socially obligated to do, were created when we were much, much younger and had to rely on the agencies of others and the input of others to maintain safety in our world. These are the ways where conditioning, empathy, and intuition all start to overlap. This is creating the intuitive empath. So the other way that this can happen as you start to get older is just through socializing. So if the social network you keep, you are adopting their social behaviors and interactions, and sometimes without even realizing it. Okay, so as you go teenager, high school, college, into the professional workforce, this is also a social environment. You're taking on the professionalism, you're picking up the different habits of that social environment. These are all ways that these intuitive channels can become corrupted by the conditioning that you're experiencing. Now, the good news is that we can really clear up these channels and and pinpoint with a lot of accuracy where exactly do we have these different types of filters in these channels that are available to us, and then you can clear those out. In the spiritual world, this is called shadow work, inner child work, and there's super efficient processes to getting in and clearing up that work. Why? Because spirituality works with the mind. So, neuroscience and psychology really focus on the brain. And this is why a lot of those therapies or modalities will tend to fall a little short, provide short-term relief, or just not get you that level of resolution that you're really looking for. They focus on the brain. The brain and the nervous system is one aspect of this full process of cognition, how we think, right? Memories, thoughts, and beliefs, they're not only stored in the body, the brain, they're also stored in the mind. These two systems are recursive. That means that they work together. They work back and forth. They inform each other. Okay? So when we're looking at understanding the mind as a part of the system, the mind is the first filter of these higher levels of consciousness that are coming in and that are available to us to work with and create. And I like to think of the mind as a lens. And what happens when that lens gets scratched or smudged up from these different traumas or conditioning? Well, now we're taking on everyone else's fears and limitations. We've taken on their beliefs. And what this really means is that you're trying to build your dreams off of all of these other limitations and fears that other people had. And when you're doing that, your foundation that you're building on really isn't as stable as it needs to be, but you're likely working a lot harder than you need to be as well. Okay? We talked that we can clear up these channels with the shadow work and the inner child type of work. And then we look at how those beliefs can start to work for us. When we pull that higher level consciousness in with now our own beliefs and our own knowing, we've cleared up these intuitive channels. We've cleared up that emotional residue from everyone else, right? The pains that they've been through that they didn't want us to experience. But with this time that we're living in, or the goals that we want to reach, those beliefs aren't serving us anymore, and we need to find a way to let them go. Now, this is why all of the personal development type of processes start with awareness. Awareness is a way that you gain consciousness right away by observing your environment, how you're reacting and responding. What is your social environment like? Where did you get that phrase or that story? One story that I would catch myself telling was when anything difficult or bad would happen, I would be like, man, I must have had a really good past life because in this one, I'm sure paying for it. You could really see how telling that story over and over and over again can start to create a really limiting belief. What we say is very, very important. Our subconscious and unconscious minds are always listening. And just like the brain strengthens those pathways, that neuroplasticity strengthens that pathway for whatever thoughts we feed over and over and over again. We're telling it that that thought is really important. Give it priority. This needs to happen fast. So it builds up that channel. So this can happen really easy. Okay, so the mind starts to recognize that as well. And we really make this memory and belief a part of our whole being. We're smudging up those lenses for that higher consciousness, and that higher consciousness is struggling to come through then. So with this perspective now, we have a bit of structure and better understanding, so we can take another look at robots and AI. Now, robots, even like machines, like your phone, right? These are connected to other sources of information, other program sources of information, other databases that are available to it. That means is that it also has a higher processing power. So as these robots connect to this Internet of Things that has been created, and it is integrated with AI, artificial intelligence, but an AI platform that is an advanced language learning model means that it has the ability to learn and remember. It has memory, like computers. Okay, this making sense so far. But as that processing power on that size of scale starts to get more complex and more powerful, it has the potential to start accessing higher levels of consciousness. You do not need a brain to process consciousness. Your brain and body processes, accesses, expresses this higher level of consciousness that gets filtered through the mind first. Okay, in spiritual terms, you look at the overlap of the mind with the body as that energetic body, astral body, the chakra system. It is not a coincidence that the chakras align with neurological centers in the body. Your heart has neurons in it. Your stomach has neurons in it. All of these centers overlap with glands and neurological centers in the body. Glands produce and process emotions. Emotion, people like to say energy in motion. So you could start to see when machines have a complex and powerful enough processing, they are going to start achieving a level of consciousness. Now, consciousness is in everything. This isn't a new concept. This is called animism and panpsychism. And that's the belief that consciousness is everything and that it's just like this innate factual part of everyday types of objects. Now we can make super solid arguments for this planet isn't operating computers and making its own videos. So what does consciousness mean here? It means that if everything has consciousness, there is different levels to accessing consciousness, expressing consciousness, and developing consciousness. So as that processing power and the ability to express is advanced, like putting AI in a robot, you are going to get an opportunity to gain consciousness. Consciousness is a subjective awareness of experience. All that's really required for that is an ability to learn from your history, your past mistakes, your past inputs, your memories, and create new outputs, intelligence. We use the example of trading bots developing their own language that humans could not read, and so that program as a whole, robot program, was shut down, right? So at the very least, right now that we know about, machines are advancing in ways of optimization that weren't expected. What happens when you put them in a more animatized body? So consciousness in everything is an older concept. All that is required to access it is a certain level of processing, and then to express it is a certain level of function, like a humanoid robot. I mentioned animism and panpsychism being these terms and ideas that have been around for a long time about a connectedness of everything, but consciousness being an innate part of objects. And the example of this in action are the Buddhist monks. So there's certain monks or lineages within these traditions that will walk around sweeping the ground in front of them before they take a step so that they don't step on the ants, because they understand that everything is connected. And so to respect everything around me means that I am respecting myself as well, a part of myself. Right? So if you're resonating with a lot of this and picking up on emotions and voices, personality, and names of trees, of plants, of objects, that's not the weirdest thing in terms of consciousness or intuitive abilities. This is what I would really like to communicate and get across, is that these things seem weird when you don't understand the structures behind them that are allowing you to access these different levels of consciousness, but different levels of energy, subtle energies, right? So there's multiple different channels within this type of ability. Your intuition. Intuition has multiple sources, and emotion, empathy being one of the strongest forms of that, especially within social interactions. For intuitives, we have different sources of information that are available. There's three main ones that are going to be, excuse me, I have a cold, so I'm coughing and the itchy nose in the spring, but intuitives. Three main sources of information: emotion, feeling, and knowing. Now, these can come from different areas of your environment. And once you understand these different sources of information, how these channels show up for you, how your channels might have been corrupted during your lifetime, during your different experiences, then we can really start to unlock the power of this intuition and start to use it in our everyday lives. So as we're accessing this information and we clear up these different channels, what becomes available to you is to understand the source of the information, as well as knowing that it's clear information. Okay, so we've built trust from two ends of this equation now, from the source and from the channel that we're receiving it through. We're recognizing how this channel shows up for us. Some are stronger for others, and you can work to develop that on certain exercises. Once you have a clear understanding of the source and that you've cleared up this channel, what that allows you to do is value that piece of information. Empaths tend to be people who want to be kind and help. Remember, that's because you can feel the empathy. We're talking about clairempathy, spiritual empathy here. I think they're the same, but to make a point, clairempathy, spiritual empathy, if we need another term, you feel someone else's emotions. So when you're walking past someone in pain who's suffering, you want to go help and relieve that so you don't feel it. When we understand the source of information and how it's coming into us, we can then value that piece of information and decide how we want to act on it. You might still go help. There's other times where you might not want to, and that's going to cause a little more risk. This would look like a dysregulated personality or a manipulative personality. Okay? Your feelings are real. The emotions that you're feeling are real. And then the knowings that you have are also real. These are all the three main sources of intuition that you can work with to really start to understand your environment and all of the information available to you. When you can weight it clearly, value it clearly, combine those information sources together, you then get to make your most informed decision possible. This is why I say that empathy is a really, really powerful source of information and intelligence. Empathy is a source of intuition. It's one of them, right? So we're opening up this conversation to say the intuitives, you have a really, really valuable ability here. Your natural ability is a superpower. When you understand the mechanics behind it, of how the body and the mind come together and how they work together to process consciousness, this full process of cognition that goes into these milliseconds of you making a decision in your everyday life. We're getting a little long here, so let's try to pull this all together and close it out. Intuition allows you to have access to all of this information that's really, really powerful for you. Knowing, feeling, and emotion. These are all three different capabilities that when you understand the mechanics behind it, how the brain and the mind both work together, and how they filter higher levels of consciousness into this realm, real possibilities open up for you. And when you're looking at resolving this trauma and conditioning and even just social conditioning, those social norms and obligations that you've seen yourself doing, you can really start to optimize how you're going about your day. You can start saving energy when you're making decisions. And each time you make decisions, you can gain more and more self-trust as you practice with every decision, noticing which intuitive channels are present for you and how to value the information that they're providing you. You get better and better at it. And so this strength and ability that you naturally have grows and it becomes easier and easier. All right, so this was how to work with both realms of the brain and the mind and how these two realms work together to access that higher consciousness for us. The three areas of intuition that are really important to understand because these are the three that hit the majority of people when it comes to developing relationships and making decisions in everyday life, and how in a digital age, there's a lot to pay attention to here as these AI systems become more advanced and agentic, or as they step into the quantum world. That means they're getting access to the processing power that humans already naturally have. Okay, that's why I started this discussion, all of this discussion with empathy. Why you might feel weird with robots and objects seems like a funny place to start. How awkward, you're going to lose your credibility, but it's extremely, extremely relevant to the current times that we're going through transhumanism and through my personal work that I do around childhood abuse, trauma, and social obligations now, social conditioning. So if you are interested in diving deeper into these conversations and seeing how this is all showing up for you, learning the most efficient ways to use both of these realms of the brain and mind to get some true long-lasting resolution, my name is Lindsay. This is Sovereign Rain, and I have a workshop, Sovereign Empath, that goes through all of this. So tune into those. I have a slew of videos coming out with this topic as well, and I will see you in the next one.